wandering through his kitchen, which he doesn't use very often. And he's got one hell of a setup for alcohol. And I look on the wall, and there's the print from Acidus on the wall. And actually, I don't know. He probably brought somebody in to mount it on the wall. But every year we go through and do one of these. So we're doing a silent auction for this, which is 01 of 10. We also have. We did it last year, and we decided to just go ahead and do both of them this year too. We have the face of the program, the graphic. Oh, here we go. And we're working on getting all the speakers to sign it. So we'll have. Oh, we already got him. So we have the print of the graphics, and then all of the speakers and staff get to sign these, and we have a frame for it and everything. It's what can you say? I come from a group of people that I can make one of those. That's true, but the thing that we tried to do was we made it something special. It's a piece of history because you can go to DEF CON and spend the entire weekend running around everywhere and not be able to meet half the people that you said you were going to meet there. At Outerz0ne, you're going to get drunk with every one of them tonight. And tomorrow you're going to be barfing in someone else's bathroom. So, it's all a nice, close social kind of thing.
And then they take advantage of you and not call you the next day.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. I actually have to call other people to call you to get you to call me back.
I'm going to announce.
Huh? I've tracked him down by Anna before, by Tom. Who else was it? Every time I've sent it, Nick. I've had Nick. Yeah. Yeah. No, what you want is Liz's ringtone. This is what it is. He grabbed that phone in a heartbeat, baby. There you go. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this up to the front and put it back on the easel. Lady Merlin is getting the other one signed by all the speakers and staff. If you're interested, you come up and make a bid. It's a silent auction at first. I think the highest one ever went for was $200.
Last year it wasn't silent. I thought it was.
Well, when we get in the middle of the contest prize giveaway awards and closing ceremonies, that's when the bidding gets pretty heated because everybody wants it and there's only one of them, and it's really fun to watch Billy get stomped.
No, it's pretty.
I did lose last time.
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty.
But so anyway, it's going to be back at the back along with the other one. So if you want to make a bid for the silent auction on it, it's awesome. Then when we get down, there'll be a fist fight in the parking lot over it. So Billy is my keynote, if that's what Outerz0ne actually has.
No, we're not organized enough.
No. He's the one who showed up late enough today to get the last spot. I have to track him down every year. He says, "Yeah, I'm going to do a talk." Click. Hello. What's it going to be about? I'm text messaging. I send it emails.
He called me on a Saturday, and I
you have a lot of
customers,
I will
totally be
gotta
there.
worry about
I'll have a talk. I'll go pick this stuff up tomorrow. And then it was like Wednesday before I got the stuff back to him.
Yeah, please. Just last year, I called him and he was in the airport going from one plane to another. And it was like, what is your fucking talk going to be about? And he goes,
I'm about to go through security. I'm going to hang up. He's like, give me your fucking talk.
It's going to be real cool. I don't fucking care. Just give me a sentence to put on the program. I'm literally, I've got to walk in the other room. I've got to type it in, finish typesetting, and then send it off for someone to print it. Please, Billy, would you just tell me what the talk is going to be? If you looked on the website, for the longest time it said Billy said he was going to get me this by Saturday, and he didn't. Epic fail!
Pretty shitty. I mean, it's free.
Yeah, absolutely. So, without further ado, I'm going to get out of the way and let the man do his job. He's going to take as much time as he wants to show you all the cool things he brought. So,
I'm standing in front between dinner and drinking, so I'm not going to take
people working on it.
Do what you got to do.
I have a lot of faith in it.
Sure, thank you. Actually, before I get started, I just want to stay up here, Trevor. I just want to say, I always tell Trevor I'll talk, and I'll talk whenever, as long as he keeps doing these, I'll talk, because I absolutely love what he does. And so, go get a T-shirt, stick some money in the big giant tin or the big giant water bottle, because this isn't cheap to put this stuff on. A lot of this comes out of people's like Lady Merlin's or Sky Dogs or Press Mike's pocket and stuff like that they throw. Well, less than him. He looks like a cheap bastard.
Yeah, a little bit.
So, do what you can to support them, because it's a fantastic conference, and I hope you guys have many, many more.
Thank you, sir. Next year, get it to me early.
It's going to be called Some Fucking Talk. Okay, so I'm gonna move this around. So I do web stuff, kind of. I just because it's fun. And stuff I've been kind of playing with recently is it's very odd as we've moved towards kind of Web 2.0, which is really a nice buzzword, to kind of this idea of occasionally connected apps. You can really do whatever you want with them. You can be online, you can be offline. This, I saw a lot of people around here with netbooks. This idea of an application is something that you install on your desktop, or this application is something that exists on a server. We're entering this weird, murky middle ground. It's like we're in a cloud, but kind of like the cloud they'll use to try to get lots of venture money, I suppose. So really what I wanted to talk to you about is what kind of is the future of web applications? Is it the client? What's exactly going on here? So just to kind of touch on this briefly, the Web 2.0 landscape, really the key thing here is you have a much richer client. Here, I'll put this on. So Web 1.0 stuff very much was very simple client server apps. You'd go ahead, you'd have everything actually running on the server, and your browser was simply a dumb terminal. All right, excellent. So your browser was just a dumb terminal to connect you to this web server application. Now, when we went to Web 2.0, what we really did is say, you know what, we can have a much richer experience if we push a little bit of this application to the browser in the form of, say, JavaScript or God forbid, Silverlight or Flash or something like that. So we're actually going to push part of the application to the client, so that way they can get instantaneous feedback. We can have a much richer experience, as opposed to, say, if you're using, the classic example is MapQuest in the late 90s. Horrible experience. You'd, say, let me go east. You'd wait 3 seconds. You'd get your page back. It was just, something more interactive like Google Maps. So really, for this talk, what I want to do is focus on the client itself, because instead of being a dumb terminal, we added a little bit more. And we keep adding a little bit more and a little bit more. It's kind of like Perl. You keep getting a little bit more from CPAN until you end up with this monstrosity. So the thing we're starting to see now is this idea of offline applications. And kind of the way these things work is, and I know this is black and white. I pulled this out of a... Actually, I've got some sexy Flash stuff at the end of this. This is actually an image in the book that I wrote called Ajax Security with a guy named Brian Sullivan. So you have this idea of the UI that you're interfacing with. And then behind the scenes, it's basically going to have a data switch. And it says, all right, if I'm online, the server. If I'm not online, let's go ahead, run through another abstraction layer and somehow store it in a client-side database inside of the web browser. And then when I connect, it will transparently resync it. Kind of everything people have said about Google and kind of Web 2.0 apps is, okay, yeah, I love Gmail. What happens when I get on a plane? And I get on a plane a lot. And it sucks because I can't do anything. With Outlook, I can go ahead, I can compose messages, look through what I've got, update my address book, all sorts of stuff. With Gmail, nothing. I'm on the plane. It's a web application, but unless I'm connected to the web, I can't do anything with it. Well, this is an idea of when I'm about to go offline, I can go ahead and have it store my inbox on the client in a database, or maybe store the most recent messages I sent, maybe store my most important contacts. This is actually kind of cool from a computer science perspective, because it's like, programmatically, how do I figure out what the most important things are so I can cache them locally, so that when they're not connected, they can still do meaningful things. And then when we reconnect, just like when I get off the plane with Outlook and I plug it back in, it sends everything that's in my outbox, all that type of stuff. So, at the end result of this, we're talking about you shouldn't be able to tell the difference between when you're connected to the web application or you're working offline. Let me repeat this again. Let me say that again. Don't mind me, I've been drinking. We're going to put so much of the web application on the client that we are able to do meaningful things when we're not even connected to the web. Well, content to the web. Are you kidding me? I mean, the #1 rule of web security is you cannot trust the client. Perfect example is what Rob was showing. He's like, I'm going to do various encoding techniques, things like that, and try to get it to the server. And it was the server's job to canonicalize everything to say, okay, is this, are they doing hat width or full width Unicode? What are they doing to actually get through and send attacks to me? So this idea that, wait a minute, no, we're going to have a lot of the browser actually play a role in the application, and we're going to have JavaScript and Flash and everything else in here.
anybody who does anything with security should immediately be scared by this. So kind of the way they accomplish this is really three things. One, you need a very rich client-side programming language. Now, normally JavaScript is used, though we'll see a little later in the presentation. You can use Flash, you can use pretty much anything you want. Now, the other thing, well, two other things you're going to need is one is a local cache for web documents. So in Google Gears, which is an offline AJAX application framework that's built into Google Chrome, or it's accessible as a plugin to the other browsers, they call this a local store. Anybody here familiar with the HTML5 spec? It's kind of like the next generation of HTML. It has this built in. Both of these things are in the spec. So any browser that does HTML5 is going to allow you to have client-side cache of web documents and a client-side database. So this is basically when you're not connected, but I click on a take me to my inbox, the images, the JavaScript, the cascading style sheets, the HTML, those are actually cached on my local system. So instead of making a request all the way to the web server to pull those documents down, it just pulls it from my cache. Now, the thing here to remember, and I'll go into it for a little bit more detail, is that this is different than your browser cache. A lot of people, you know, you'll go in and say, let's say you've been, I don't know, using a company machine to look at YouPorn while you're on a long business trip, and you want to clear out all that nasty content. A lot of people will go into their browser settings and say, clear my cache. This is a different cache than that. That cache is there purely for performance. This cache is actually there as a manifest of offline documents that you're going to be accessing when you're not actually connected to the internet. The second part of this is that you need a client-side database. I don't really care what this takes, whether it's a database or whether it's a giant hash table, but I need a way of saying, here's some data and here's a name, store this, and later I'm going to retrieve it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So just about JavaScript, because I get this a lot, and hopefully, you know, if you guys have seen me talk before, you know, JavaScript is kind of something I play a lot with, and hopefully I've been able to express to you that it's not just something that makes the gerbils dance and gives you little mouse trails and all the annoying crap on the web. It's actually extremely powerful. It's an object-based language. It has very powerful native features. Its object and array models are very, very rich. It has native regexes, other things like this. So it's not just simply a toy scripting language. You actually can redefine JavaScript code at runtime. I believe I gave an example last year where I had nothing but white space, so it would get past your IDE or your IDS or IPS, and it basically rehydrated itself to full-blown malware code once it got through. And so, yeah, it was pretty sexy. I think I don't want to give the demonstration again, but I guess I could if you wanted to see it.
It's worth it.
It is pretty sexy. It took I'll tell you about it because I think it's pretty sexy. It basically took malware, or it took any type of JavaScript and basically took, it first converted it just to bits because all JavaScript can be represented by 7-bit ASCII. Even though it's say the strings and stuff inside of it can be Unicode, you know, the keywords and the function names, everything's all 7-bit ASCII. So I would take a character in JavaScript, say A, convert it to binary, 7 bits. So 0, 1, what? Capital A is 65 in ASCII. So, well, anyway, do the math. So I converted it to this, and then I said, okay, this is the bit stream of what this looks like. Every time I see a 0, I'm going to put a space. Every time I see a 1, I'm going to put a tab. When you hit the new line, I'm done. So literally, alert would be translated into like space, tab, space, 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 tab, space, tab, tab, tab. Nothing but white space. And it would be between 2 HTML comments. And then what happened is the JavaScript would just say, hey, fetch between this comment and this comment where it just looks like white space, fetch that for me and let me convert it back into ASCII code and then use the eval function to execute. So you actually can redefine and execute this stuff at runtime. And this bears repeating. No, you literally, you call a function once, it does something. You call the function again, it does something completely different. You actually can override system functions. So there was a really sexy attack. Does everybody here know what a constructor is inside when you're programming or whatever? Some of you. All right, you actually can redefine constructors at runtime. So you could say, all right, normally when someone constructs an array, they call this function. Now when somebody tries to construct an array, they're going to call my constructor, which is evil, and it's going to sniff everything you give it. So it's it's a really crazy language. It's extremely powerful in its networking functionality. So it doesn't have native networking functionality, but JavaScript is embedded inside the browser. So you're talking about XML HTTP request, which is the basis of AJAX. You're talking about I can talk to a Flash object, which can do raw sockets. It can cross the same domain policy, different things like that. There's also some models of threading in JavaScript and in the implementations. And we see, you know, with the new, like Google Chrome, with their V8 engine, we see with WebKit, we see with, I believe, Opera, the new alpha they just released. JavaScript performance, they're just focusing on making this stuff run as fast as possible. So it's powerful. People are trying to make this run faster, and a lot of people don't necessarily understand the nuances of it, and they still kind of have this very late 90s view that, okay, this is just kind of some little toy language that people use to make stupid animations on their, you know, GeoCities page. Which I just, on a side note, I think it's funny because back in the day when I started getting into the web, like GeoCities was the thing, right? Like 90, 94, 95, 96. And now like everything that you hated about the internet back in the day, like purple animated GIF backgrounds with black text on top of it, you just go to MySpace and you see the same thing. So it just shows you, you know, a generation later or a decade later,
It's like style.
exactly, you still have, you know, 14-year-olds who, you know, want to talk about how nobody understands them with, you know, flashing, you know, whatever animated backgrounds and just, oh, part of me, I have to think somewhere Tim Berners-Lee wishes he could take this all back. I also like to think that he wants to punch a lot of people in the face and be like, it's a document layout language. What the fuck are you guys doing with this? So, local cache of web documents. So, all right, as I said, this is different than your browser cache. It basically, there's a manifest. So you visit a web page, and that web page through, say, like a link tag in the head of the document will say, hey, here's the manifest for accessing this page offline. Now, the manifest looks a lot like a jar file. Jar files are Java. They're basically a zip file with a manifest inside of them that basically says things like, hey, here's the class you should learn. Same thing with this. This has a manifest that says, okay, here are all the web documents I want you to fetch. I want you to fetch this HTML document, fetch this JavaScript document, these images, so that way you can access them offline. Now, the browser just fetches this stuff and stores it. Now, what happens is it's transparently accessed. So if I suddenly turn off network connecting, and you know, I'm sure you've seen this in your browser. If you go under File, say, you know, Work Offline, and that'll be checked if you're in, say, Firefox. There's an equivalent thing. I don't know exactly what it says in IE. That happens when the browser tries to access the network, but can't. It toggles it automatically into offline mode. Now, one of the things HTML5 tries to do is standardize amongst the browsers how the browser tells the web page you're currently on or the JavaScript you're currently executing that it's now in offline mode. Mozilla, WebKit, some of these other guys just have navigator.offline, and you can query this property like a Boolean. So this information is programmatically accessible. So the JavaScript or the Flash can figure out, okay, here's what I'm dealing with. I'm now in offline mode, so instead of making a fetch, you know, to say compose this email and try to send it to Gmail, what I actually need to do is stick this in the client-side database. So a couple of things. Like I said, Google Gears provides some of this offline capabilities. HTML5, here's the scary thing about HTML5 is it's not standardized yet, but already the browsers are implementing various features of it. So Firefox 3 already has HTML5 stuff in it. It already has the ability to tell when you're offline. It already has the ability to use these things called global storage and session storage, which actually I'm not talking about here, but are a component. Firefox 3.1 has all of the stuff I'm talking about it in. Now the scary thing is it's built in. Google Gears at least presents you with this dialogue. Google Chrome, which has Google Gears built into it, this offline framework, presents you essentially this diagram, or this dialogue. Now, you'll notice here is that Google Gears security permissions are host, port, and scheme. You visit a web page, say www.facebook.com. It's going to come back, and this little thing is going to say, hey, something on www.facebook.com is trying to access Google Gears to do offline storage. Do you want to allow this, yes or no? As anybody who knows really anything about the history of the web and security, asking users to make security decisions is a bad decision. Because, you know, as my mom wants to say, but I just wanted to see the funny animation, or I want to see the movie of the cats, and it was this thing that popped up that said ActiveX, you should never, never, never do this. Do you want to do this? And she clicks yes. Actually, ISS used to run, they had a great marketing campaign many, many years ago where they said, you know, you've locked down your firewalls, you've got all this stuff, blah, 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 but are you ready for Sally in accounting? And it was about how there's always somebody inside of any organization, when they receive an email that says, this is a virus.exe, they execute it. They, you know, these are the people who fall for the Nigerian 409 or 419 scams, right? So asking Sally in accounting, do you want to do this, is a bad choice. Now, it gets worse because Google Gears at least does this. What happens is that HTML5 doesn't really make recommendations about how you should do it. So all the browsers present this differently. Now, a problem with HTML5, you'll notice, is that you have some control over this dialogue it presents, just like ActiveX. ActiveX used to say, this is a program from, and it was supposed to be the domain name, and you could basically fill out in your ActiveX control what it wanted to display, and of course people would display, click yes to download my sexy weather bug, you know, whatever, to give you weather updates, and so they could control essentially the security dialogue. Well, this right here is the fave icon, and this right here is the title of the web page you're visiting. So I've seen in the wild attacks where people are using a domain where the fave icon is a lock. And the title of the web page is, you know, this is perfectly secure, click yes to do this, or something like that. And so people are like, allow. Now, of course, this is the really scary checkbox, right? You know, trust this, always allow it to do this. Now, so basically it's host port scheme. Now, the scary thing about host port scheme is that, you know, in your Web 1.0 days, you know, you had Gmail, or excuse me, you had GeoCities, you had separate little areas where everybody was. But the problem with kind of today's web is you look at something like Facebook. You have a page where there are little chunks, little widgets, you know, to check your Gmail or little Facebook applications. The lines are all blurred. Facebook actually, all Facebook applets, all those little applications are all served from the same domain. It's called apps.facebook.com. So you go ahead and allow one application in apps.facebook.com to use Google Gears, every application can use it. And more importantly, one application can access the data of another application without the application's consent. So having just host, port, and scheme as your security model is a really bad idea in today's world of mashups because it's all shared hosting. It's all in the same place.
What about the default state of that checkbox? Can you control that programmatically?
No. They weren't that stupid. So how can you attack local cache? Well, consider something like apps.social.net and apps.social.net. I've got safe app and evil app. They both programmatically through JavaScript can talk to this same logical cache so that safe app can say, okay, when they're not offline, I want to present them this pretty picture of a cat, or this is how I want the app to work when it's offline. The problem is that the evil app, because it's host, port, and scheme, they're served from the same area, can access what this guy saves. So let me actually give you an example of that. Let's say you've got something like sexyapp.com Ajax Mail. So we're going to have a really basic thing here where you've got Ajax Mail, and so I've got some, you know, stuff from work and such from in here. So, okay, sexyapps.com Ajax Mail says, all right, we're going to go ahead and store this stuff offline so you can access it, just like Outlook. Well, then you've got, so basically what that would look like, the cache, and this is the actual JavaScript for Google Gears, is you say, okay, I want to store this, the name of my offline cache is going to be safe app cache. Here are the files I want to capture. Here's essentially the manifest. You know, I want the inbox, the style sheet, the Gears.init JavaScript, the common JavaScript, and the logo, this image. And then all it does is says, okay, I want to create this local storage, create the store name, and then for all the files I want to capture them into the data store. So that when I'm offline and I go ahead and it tries to render the page, it's got the style sheet to render it, it's got the PNG, it's got everything it needs. Well, here's the thing. So maybe I've got Eve is Evil over here, who's located on sexyapp.com. Eve is Evil can use this same JavaScript and say, hey, I want to instantiate, you know, this particular store name and actually access those files and read the information out of the cache. Now in this case, because my inbox actually had in the HTML the emails I received, Eve is evil, which is still on the same domain, just like a Facebook widget, but separate, can actually access the contents. And here enough we see, date, name, subject, read JavaScript analysis engine, things like that. So I can actually steal the content from one to the other. Yes?
So offline, can your app, Eve is evil, grab that stuff, go back online, upload it?
Yes. Yes, it can.
Be hacking going offline.
Exactly. So I'm able to hack and steal this information offline, and then as soon as you reconnect, I upload it again. But it's not just about stealing, right? So here's the thing that I've learned. If you look at the way web apps are used, back in the day, we had hacktivism, which is the most bullshit term I've ever heard. And I've heard a lot of bullshit terms. Like, we're going to deface this and talk about Tibet. Okay, great, good for you. Then we went ahead and moved on to, you know what, hacking the website and putting up political messages isn't as sexy as hacking the website and stealing data, right? Because that's what we're doing now. We're going to steal data. And so you had lots of SQL injection attacks, lots of, all these things actually try to exploit the web server and take data from it. But attackers have moved on. As Rob talked about in his talk with the ASP Outerz0ne, what they've done is attackers say, you know what? Simply, seeing a site like an orange and squeezing it until all the juice is gone and just moving on, that's stupid. The web server is a platform I can use to attack other people. So I'm going to use things like MPAC, these various exploit frameworks. I'm going to compromise the web server and use it as a platform to attack other people. Well, same thing. Why would I just want to steal data when I can attack other people? So in this case, we're going to smash that local document cache for fun and profit. So inside of Evil Apps code, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, same thing as before. We're going to instantiate, we're going to open up and access their local data storage. This is the same way we were able to steal the data, but instead of actually trying to steal the data, we're going to start replacing the data. So that when you're offline and you're using this Ajax program, maybe this email program, instead of using the programming logic you're supposed to be using, I'm actually able to inject code. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, so this is in Eve is evil. You visit it, says, okay, first thing I want you to do is capture the document fake inbox.html from the Eve is evil app. Then I want you to remove ... go down directory, go into the safe app, and remove from the document storage their inbox. And then I want you to copy the document I downloaded into their document store. So I've now replaced their document, and I have renamed it inbox, so that when I'm using essentially this Ajax Mail offline program, and they visit, say, inbox.html to try to manipulate their current messages, what they're actually doing, so we go ahead and smash the cache, what they actually do is see that all of these things here have now been modified. You think you're just using Ajax Mail, but another program was able to compromise the application store that this thing is using when it's offline. So now instead of, my good friend John Terrell lamenting, where did he go? This is actually the scientific name for crabs. Instead of lamenting about the fact that he has crabs, it now says, dude, I'm clean. Jill is telling me you're a pig, I'm taking the cats and going to my mother's. You see all of these things, and of course Eve put in a nice little thing that says you've been owned. So don't think about just HTML, think about if I actually inject JavaScript. So yeah, go ahead.
Won't the user only see that if they're offline now?
Correct. That's a good point. So what I'm doing is I'm essentially polluting the cache that they're going, basically the document store that the Ajax application is going to use, the Ajax Mail app is going to use when they're offline. So when they're online, I'm not able to necessarily taint it. I'd have to use another type of poisoning mechanism, like DNS cache poisoning, different things like that. This is essentially taking the idea of network cache poisoning and moving it to the client through this idea of offline applications. Does that make sense? Cool. So I can go ahead and I can actually clobber and inject in. So instead of trying to change maybe the HTML, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change the actual JavaScript that's going to be used by the program when it's offline. Now, okay, cache poisoning is boring to me. It's not nearly as sexy as actually attacking better data. And really, remember, the document storage isn't going to have that much interesting stuff in it. It's going to have application logic, right, in the form of .js files, maybe some CSS, things like that. But what I really want to have access to is this client-side database. because this is what the app is using all the way back up here when it's offline. And it's saying, oh wait, I can't connect to the server? We'll stick it all in this database. And then when I'm done, let's resync. Okay, interesting. What can I stick in this database to attack the user while they're using it? And maybe the authentication and input validation issues that are done when I'm directly through the server, maybe those are better than what's done by the syncing engine. So maybe the syncing engine is contacting different web services. So if I hack the web app when it was online mode, it wouldn't work. But if I'm offline, I put malicious crap in my database and then I reconnect to sync, maybe that's a better way to hack the app. Yeah. Sure.
When they resync and go back online, it's going to sync back up. Will all that get overwritten, or will I still have a keylogger on that page permanently?
Good question. I'm actually not sure. I would think that it would resync. It would down, because it's going to visit the page and say, oh, I've got a new manifest. Now there might be something with like time date stamps on the manifest file. Like the browser might say, hey, I might want to use this app offline again. Let me make a request to the web server, basically like a conditional get, and say, hey, manifest, have you been modified? The version I've got is this date. And so it's possible that it wouldn't get clobbered. That's a good question.
But the manifest is different for the safe app and evil app, right?
Yes, it is. But what happened is that the evil app can act. So the manifest basically for the good app says, here's what I want to store locally. And so the evil app is going to say, I'm actually going to modify what you stored locally, so that when the next time I visit the page, my browser might say, hey, here are the files I have in my offline manifest. Is that okay? And the web server would be like, yes, the time date stamp hasn't modified on
But
those.
the manifest isn't signed or checksum.
No, not. There's no signing or checksumming. Now you're starting to see what a bad idea this is.
So any current application relevant to this technology not to trust the Google data store whenever you're syncing back data to the server side?
Yes. Also, you might want to name your data store something interesting and unique. So in this case, the Safecode app went ahead and they actually defined in their JavaScript, we're going to call it this. And so all the attacker, Eve, when she was setting up this attack vector, simply had to use the Ajax Mail app and say, oh, well, they're always using the name safeapp-cache. So in my app, I just need to access that data store. If the name was unique, because basically there isn't a way for you to say, hey, give me a list of the data stores associated with this domain. It's like a hash table. You have to know the name. So if they, for example, maybe took the username and MD5'd that and used that as the store name, that would probably be better because it's not predictable. Well, hopefully a salted MD5. Did I see another hand for a question? Yeah. Well, it is. So, and I talk about this later, but you have to understand, most web developers are not programmers. They didn't come into this through programming. The barriers to to being a web developer are non-existent today, right? So for me to be an app developer, what do I need? Well, I pretty much need Visual Studio, which is expensive. And I mean, if I'm doing traditional Windows client server desktop development, I'm going to need this type of stuff. I'm going to need debuggers. I'm going to need all this crap. What do I need if I'm doing web development? Eclipse, free. I could do it in Notepad if I wanted. PHP, okay. The LAMP stack. The barriers of entry are so low, you have people who don't really know what they're doing able to get into this very quickly. And what's worse is bullshit evaluations of Twitter for, what was it, like $250 million? Are you fucking kidding me? You know, it's driving people who, they basically are seeing blood in the water, and they're saying, okay, it's really easy for me to make a lot of money in this space. I have to admire the cojones on the CEO of Facebook, where Yahoo, about 2 years ago, offered them $800 million for Facebook. And he said, no, we want $2 billion. It's like, you're a fucking dropout from Harvard who wrote some PHP. And you're going to stare down Jerry Lag at Yahoo and say, $2 billion. So there's a lot of blood in the water, and everybody is like, I can be the next, you know, Kevin Rose or something, another guy who sucks a lot. Yeah.
You had said that they could share codes back and forth between the documents, or between the applications. would they be able to impose new graphics on pop-up windows?
Sure. Well, the only thing they can do is manipulate what's already there. So by a pop-up window, I'm not going to be able to manipulate, say, a browser's. If I use, say, JavaScript like the confirm or the alert box, I might be able to change them. But if by pop-up window you mean like window.open with this HTML file, and they've got like an image that uses this, they could control that.
Right, but you were talking about the checkbox and being able to control the
Yes.
Could you change the graphics between the two states?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I think what happens when that save dialog pops up is that, I don't know. That's a really good question.
Or superimposing a picture over the top and making it transparent to the mouse click?
Like a click jacking?
Are you talking about the icon that's an alert or
That-
an exclamation point?
No. He's talking about
checkbox.
he's talking about the security dialog that pops up. So this, I believe, this is a great example. It shows the fact that HTML5 really should address how this information should be presented to the user. So Gears, I'm pretty sure you visit a page and it wants to present this, and so it just says the current page I'm looking at. Let me grab the fave icon for it. So they might have that might just literally be /faveicon.ico. Or that could be something that's specified maybe through a link tag in the head of the current document I'm looking at. I don't know. I'm going to have to look at that.
Graphic over the top. If you couldn't change the link state, you'd still be able to view the state of the window and be able to change the graphic.
Correct, but this is a browser dialog. It's not like a control. So JavaScript could not put something on top of this. For web browsers, browser-generated dialogs have the highest Z value, so you can't put anything on top of them. You can. With this particular case, I can go ahead and throw something up here on this. There was actually a really good talk at ShmooCon, actually, I believe. No, I'm sorry, actually, it was Black Hat Federal, where a guy named Moxie was talking about all the different ways you can screw with SSL. And the main thing is you hijack it before it becomes SSL and use things like fave icons that are locks and stuff like that to make them think it's SSL, which is a pretty sexy hack. Okay, so let's focus on the client-side database. Now, I was in the middle of writing my Ajax book. Gears came out in the middle of 2007, like middle of summer. It was like June or July. And just this past summer, in 2008, they changed the name to just be Gears. But when they came out with this, we're going to have a client-side database that you can talk to from JavaScript, I'm like, hell yeah, this is awesome. More stuff I can exploit from my cross-site scripting attacks. Because remember, cross-site scripting is just about popping alert boxes and stealing cookies. So, basically the client-side database that you're allowed access to, it's a SQLite database. Now, I had heard of SQLite, but I hadn't really dug into it. SQLite is really, who here has ever messed or played with SQLite by chance? All right, so.
It's like one deal out.
Yeah, so SQLite is basically a way, most of the time databases are nasty and complicated. You have like a database server, you have a client to connect to, like look at MySQL. You have MySQLD, that's a daemon that's running. When you create new tables, it throws all this shit over var, whatever, I forget where the files actually are. There's a bunch of crap, you have to sync it. SQLite is very basic. It's essentially a database, a data box, or a database in a file. And now SQLite, it supports SQL statements, so select, inserts, deletes, all that great stuff. It's got tables, you can create indexes. I believe the newest version has transactions. Now, there are some interesting commands. Now, basically when you're using SQLite, you say, hey, my database is located in this file. And you actually can use a SQL command called attach to say, hey, I want to read data from this file. So you could say attach to, C:/document and settings, admin, whatever. So needless to say, they removed the implementation of SQLite that are in these offline frameworks. And remember, there's you probably haven't really heard of this, but Google Chrome has this. Gears is a plugin that works on most browsers. Gmail just announced the way they're doing offline email reading on the iPhone is using HTML5 because Safari and WebKit use these aspects of HTML5. So chances are most of you are running a device that does this right now and you just don't know it. So they remove the dangerous command. So JavaScript can't say, hey, yeah, I want to attach to cprompt/winnt, dig, whatever file you want to attach to. So they remove those dangerous commands. There was another command called pragma, which would let you change character encodings, different stuff like this. So Google and the HTML5 guys did a pretty good idea of neutering the more dangerous stuff. But just some native, we'll call them features, of SQLite still make it very dangerous. Well, not dangerous, rather it makes it very easy for attackers. Perfect example, once you click that little checkbox that said, yeah, this thing can use it, Google Gears lets them store infinity data on your system. No limits. You can put whatever the hell you want. Some of the other browsers will do 5, 10 megs per domain, but this isn't the late 90s where getting a subdomain was a pain in the ass. You can have infinite subdomains if you want. So there are very easy denial of service attacks where JavaScript just sits there and goes, okay, I'm going to make a, with wildcard DNS where it says, I'm going to create a database for this domain name. Oh, it resolves 10 megs of data. Now I'm going to do it for this one, 10 megs of data. And so, as Rob said with his, Leet, Uber, Intel Core Duo, you can fill up one of these drives pretty damn fast. Takes only about 2 hours of JavaScript just running. How many of you leave your web browser open and running with like 50 bazillion tabs, right?
Yeah, all of us.
I mean, something that's always bothered me is how does Firefox is lean and mean, don't get me wrong, but I switched to Firefox 3 and suddenly it's consuming like 350 megs of data, or RAM, so it's like, I don't know whether somebody's doing something nasty or they're just really bad programmers, but that seems like a lot for a web browser. There was actually a really good quote once I was reading years ago in Wired, and they were interviewing the CEO of NVIDIA, and he was talking about how we went to a general purpose processor, but now we're kind of going back out to having kind of specialized processors, FPGAs or graphics chips. And he had the greatest quotes. He was like, who the hell needs 2 gigahertz to run Excel? And I'm like, there's a lot of truth to that. But apparently we put as much bloat in as there are resources for. So size limits can go from infinity to 5 megs. Now there are some other interesting facts. Now, anybody here actually do a fair bit with databases at all, or anybody play with databases? So with databases, it's all about when you're creating the tables, what data type? Is it a varchar? Is it a char? How long is it? Is it an integer? Is it a byte? The data types are important. SQLite doesn't care about data types at all.
It's the pearl of databases.
It's the pearl of databases. Everything is a string. And the data type is there solely for convenience. So you can stick strings into a field of the database that's supposed to contain numbers. This makes it very easy to corrupt other people's data. Here's something that does suck for attackers. It does not allow stacked queries. So you no longer, one of my favorite SQL injection attacks, because everyone's like, oh, SQL injection is just about stealing data. I don't care. My favorite SQL injection attack is tick, semicolon, shut down now with no wait. Or drop tables, any of these. Drop tables, delete, so. All right, lovely stuff, but you can't do that with SQLite. Now, the thing that sucks here is that you can't stack tables, but they don't care about data types. Anybody here do SQL injection or ever type SQL injection attacks? It's all about union select queries, right? They don't care about data types. You don't have to get the data types right to make it work. So you just say, you do your injection attack and it's union, select, union it with a bunch of nulls, union it with zeros. It doesn't matter because data types aren't enforced. So even though you can't do stack queries, it doesn't really matter because your union queries work out just fine. And of course it supports the lovely dash as a comment operator. So you don't have to worry about cleaning up the rest of your attack. Also, anybody here who's done database stuff knows all sorts of fun things like your master tables inside of databases. So sysobjects inside of MySQL, or excuse me, MS SQL. SQLite, even though it's just a single database in a file, has a lovely table called SQLite Master. Now, SQLite Master has a bunch of lovely stuff. One of them is that it actually has this, you can go select name from SQL Master, and this gives you all the tables in the database. It has a command, it has a column on this table that's called SQL. And it actually spits back the SQL that was used to create that entity. So the actual SQL set, so create table, task, whatever. So it actually gives you everything like what the primary keys are, what the indexes are, what the data types are, which you don't really care about. But so just by poking around with SQL Master, you can do really nasty things. So let's go ahead, let me actually do a demo. So, okay.
So this is a fun little app. Pay no attention to that. So this is a little list app. So I've got like a to-do, and I can add items to this, you know, punch Sky Dog for making fun of me. Fine. Call Press Mike back so he stops. A lot of my to-do items end with, so he'll stop yelling at me. So this is an interesting database. Now, of course, when you're looking for SQL injection, what's a fun character to stick into places? Tick. Tick. Or, and I'm just going to do like 1 equals. So that's an incomplete SQL statement. We'll see what happens. Load list. And right down here, error message. Really? SQL logic error, missing details, unrecognized token, blah, 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 blah. This is a very familiar error message. It doesn't say ODBC, but anybody who's done anything with web apps should be very familiar with this error message. So same error message, new place. So what we can do here is I'm going to say, can you all see that in the back? Probably not. Oh, wait, that's not going to help. All right, so here we go. Sorry, yeah, let me close a couple of these toolbars here. That's how I roll. I roll with the web. Oh, good point. I roll with the web developer toolbar and switch proxy. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. So basically, what I'm assuming here, because this is a list app and it says load this list, is I'm assuming in the back end, well, actually not the back end, the client end, is basically saying, okay, give me all of the list items that Billy has in his list, where the list is equal to do. So of course, what I'm going to do is close that and say, and 1 equals 0. So that first statement, the select, give me all the items where the list is to do, it's not going to return anything now. And if I actually comment that out and click load list, I get nothing back. Because I said, give me all the items where the list name is to do and 1 equals 0, which never happens. Whoa. But what I am going to do, that's what happened when you click backspace. What I am going to do is say, union, select name from SQLite master load list. Items and list. Select star. So I just figured out what the user-defined tables in this database are. Select star from items. Load list. Oop. Oh, so I see an error, and it's because I did star, and here we see union does not have the same number of columns. So I need to come here and just do select. I don't know what these things are. Maybe name. I don't know what a valid column is in there. All right, so what I'm going to do, though, is I'll say select. I can find out, though, because I can say select SQL, select SQL from SQLite master dash. So this is going to give me the SQL that was used to construct those user-defined tables. And here we see create table. So there's an items table that has an I assume that's item ID. We see there's a lists, which is a name and a varchar. So let's go ahead and just give me, so it's got a list ID and a name. So we're going to say select, give me all the items from lists. We see I have a couple lists. I have one called to do, and then I have one called secret plans. Interesting. So basically, I could sit here and SQL inject this all day long. I'm actually sending commands to it. If we come back here, we see, I threw the tick. We see the error message. I can union select. That's all a pain in the ass. So I wrote a lovely little piece of JavaScript that you actually can plug into an XSS payload called GG Hook that actually just hooks Google Gears and dumps everything out. And here we see that, I don't know if y'all can see this in the back, I hope. I pulled out from the items table, make prezo, steal nuclear weapons, call UN, $100 billion, pinky. So I've actually been able to dump the database. Now I wrote about this in my book. I never actually released this code. PressMike kept asking me for this code. Luckily somebody else wrote a tool that does this and released it.
It's actually called, the guy is Alberto, and he wrote a tool called HTML5 CS dump, which is HTML5 client side dump. This dumps everything out. I highly suggest you grab it. Now, the interesting thing that people ask me about with client-side SQL injection is they say, okay, why is this important? Extracting the data is hard. I was SQL injecting myself. What I really need to do is be able to send a command that goes down to somebody's machine, so when they're offline, it does something nasty to their database. Selecting data out is difficult because how do I get that information sent back to me? Well, remember, SQL injection isn't about stealing data. SQL injection is about executing database commands like drop, delete, shutdown, all sorts of other fun stuff. So I can corrupt the hell out of their database, no problem. This has occurred in a while. Michael Sutton actually just gave a really excellent talk. He was a coworker of mine before he left to go do a startup. He just gave an excellent presentation where he actually found some of these client-side SQL injection vulnerabilities in the wild and was able to leverage them to attack other users of this shared payment site, which is pretty sexy. There are automated attack scripts, so I wrote gghook, and I'll probably never actually give it away, but this guy also wrote it, so you don't really need my code. The moral of the story here is stop concatenating your SQL statements. How many people have ever written code like this? Select star from users where username equals plus uname and password equals plus password.
Back in the day,
Yes, SQL injectable. Because what happens if username or password is semicolon shut down with no wait? You add this and then send it to the database to execute. You're basically saying, database, do this command. What you're really saying is, attacker, here's a shell for you to ask the database anything you like. So the same way we have parameterized SQL queries on server-side languages, we also have parameterized SQL statements in this client-side database. So Google Gears allows you to put in question marks, where username equals question mark and password equals question mark. And then you simply pass it the variables you want to stick in. So don't do this. Now here's the thing, and we're about to talk about this in a moment, is most developers don't understand this stuff. They make the stupid mistakes. And I have to say, shame on the major, essentially app dev companies. So Microsoft is horrible for this. Who here has ever gone to MSDN, Microsoft's Developer Network website, before? And I'm not even joking, every single example Microsoft has on MSDN when they talk about SQL is SQL injectable. The only one that isn't is the one that talks about parameterized queries. Every other page is injectable. Now, here's the thing. At the end of the day, you should trust Microsoft. Okay, never mind. I take that back. You would think you could trust Microsoft as a developer, that they would give you accurate documentation. The problem is that they don't. And so developers end up in this state where they don't know what to do. This is the problem we end up with. Developers are just like Sally in accounting. They don't know security. They know how to build applications. And their boss is on their ass trying to get something out the door. So the barriers to web dev, this is the other problem we're having with these offline apps that are becoming more powerful. We moved from Web 1.0, where people weren't doing really interesting things. I mean, there were expense reporting systems. There was certainly a lot of stuff that you could access. You move to Web 2.0, where the experience is a little richer, it's more user active. It makes sense for, say, people in your call center who are logging maybe support calls or something. Chances are they're using a web-based system. I actually worked at this insurance company called Crawford & Company. They're actually fairly large, but they're not like Allstate. They're more business and industry, like I need to insure my fleet of 747 type company. And I remember very distinctly in the fall of '99 having to walk around and install like Oracle 8G or something on all these systems in their call center because they weren't using a web-based system. It was all client-server based. But so many things are moving to the web because it's so cheap for companies to do it this way. The barriers for people to pick up and build web apps is very, very slim as well. So look at the LAMP stack. It's free. You've got an amazing web server. I mean, anybody who's actually ever dug around in Apache and looked at the modules, I mean, yeah, there's some crazy shit. But the fact that I can really, from just open source software, scale up a giant business on top of PHP and Memcache and Apache and have it be as fast and as supportive and scalable as it is, I mean, really is incredible when you stop and think about it. These things did not exist. This idea that you could do and prosper so much 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you had all sorts of crazy, esoteric, kind of boutique web servers. Zeus web servers still exist because it's so fast, but people went and bought web servers. People don't necessarily do that anymore. They think about the hardware. The software is a commodity at this stage. Language portability. This is a funny story. I deal a lot with web developers and telling them, look, here's the mistakes you made. And my favorite people in the world are people who know how to use Dreamweaver. No. And it's not for the reason you think. It's not because their code is full of holes, because, good Lord, it is. But they take the news so well. I cannot tell you how many times I've been called a punk-ass kid who doesn't know what he's talking about. And it's not from the Dreamweaver guys. It's from the jackass who's been writing Java for 12 years. It's like, I've been doing this for 12 years, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. You've been writing desktop apps for 11 years. And then, this past year, you guys decided to shift and do your next version as a JSP or a J2EE web app. Now you're building a web app, and you've done it very poorly. I actually get more flack from these people because they think that they're, I've got a computer science background, you're a punk kid, I don't have to listen to you. The people who knew Dreamweaver, they started as liberal artists, or they started as, basically people who use Macs and drink coffee and look down their nose at you and build really sexy websites. And then, a little bit later they were asked, hey, come in, give me a shopping cart, give me a search engine. So they moved from kind of the graphic art side into the programming side. Whereas you have these pompous assholes who move from the dev side into the web app side. Those guys are not receptive at all to security. We actually work with this guy. Rob's gonna laugh. This guy named Jerry Sullivan. Great guy. I like him a lot. But one of the first conversations I had with him at SPY was we had this portal for cutting licenses. And I was in QA at the time, and I found out that you could type, the usernames are only supposed to be 8 letters. Well, of course, you type in more, right? So I type more in, and it crashes. And I come back to Jerry. I'm like, Jerry, there's a bug. And the thing is this actually was written as an ISAPI filter, and it was actually buffer overflowable. And so I go to him. I'm like, Jerry, we got a problem. This is bad. He's like, no. Usernames are 8 characters. And I'm like, yeah, but watch this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, enter, boom. And he's like, but usernames are supposed to be 8 characters. I'm like, Jerry, dare to dream of a world where somebody types in more than 8 characters. And it's the same thing. They're like, no, people aren't supposed to use JavaScript like that, So it's the same thing. You have diverse programming backgrounds. You also have different threat models with web apps versus desktop apps. And this is why we're having, it's really a perfect storm. We're having these technologies getting thrown in very rapidly. We're having developers who don't really know what they're doing, who are getting thrown into this by the scent of money. I mean, I remember 2 years ago thinking, my God, News Corp spent $400 million for MySpace. Those dumb bastards. That looks like a really good deal right now when Facebook, which has zero revenue model at all, and essentially hardly any advertising revenue at all, is valued at $2 billion. Twitter, what the fuck? John McCain is twittering now. Yeah, exactly, not very well. They got just valuated at basically around 100, or what is it? They had a deal. I'm trying to remember the details. I've been drinking a little.
Well, it sounds like you should get
They have
writing on some of these websites.
Yeah, exactly.
What the fuck are you doing?
Exactly. So what the hell am I doing?
Poor bastard.
Well, I'm thinking of other things I can do to them. But so you basically have all this perfect storm. If you want me to drink, you need to go get me something to drink. I'm gonna take that bag off. Fuck. All right. So you really have kind of this perfect storm where you have inexperienced people, money. Ooh, no. No. There's some girly Billy drinks that are over against the wall.
Girly Billy drinks.
If it's not pink with a sugar rim, I don't want it. Needless to say. Oh shit. All right. That doesn't have a sugar rim. So you really have kind of this perfect storm. That burns. You really have this perfect storm where you have new technologies, you've got people who don't know what they're doing, you have money, and you have kind of this shift where it's not really clear. You know, used to be, it's all on the server, just validate stuff. Now it's, well, it's kind of on the server, it's kind of on the client, it's kind of in the cloud. We're running half the shit on Amazon systems. You know, it's getting very ambiguous about where do you do security, who's responsible for it, and this is why we have some of these problems. And the developer knowledge problem really is almost eclipsing the others. I'll give you a perfect example. I was trying to explain this to someone. If you have a thick client, thin server, so let's say I have some type of word processing app with maybe a SAN storage system somewhere. So if somebody is bad, they can only hurt themselves. Let me give you a perfect example. And I think I might have given this last year, but it's a good example. If I find, and I'm not saying this exists, but let's say in Microsoft Word, I pop open the find dialog and I type in 8,000 pipe characters. I press enter and I make it puke. Memory corruption. They weren't expecting that much. I have a code execution vulnerability. Who cares? All I'm doing is I'm crashing the application. I'm using the app. Why would I want to crash it? It's not remotely exploitable. It's not like it's inside the file format. And despite it being, I'm sorry?
It comes in through email.
Well, it comes in through email, but it's in the find dialog, right? So you actually have to open the find dialog and type this thing into the find bugs. So that's going to only crash a user's machine. And even if I got code execution, I'm executing code as myself. Why would I go through that much trouble to execute code as myself when I can just go file run? I mean, who cares? Now think about something like that in Google Apps. If somebody gets hurt, if somebody's bad, everybody gets hurt. So if I type 8,000 pipes into this little dialog that JavaScript gives me that actually uses SOAP to contact a web service back at Gmail to actually say spell check what I just wrote or do a find as or a save as, I'm crashing and exploiting the server, which means I'm now executing code on the server, which means I'm accessing other people's data and I'm screwing other people. Security restrictions are shared in a web environment. This is that kind of transition I said when I have these jackasses who've been writing Java for 12 years go, oh, well, just show me the, J2EE equivalent of a grid view. And it's not just Java guys, right? Microsoft guys are horrible with this too. They're like, oh, just show me the ASP.NET equivalent of a grid view, or how do I do blah, blah, blah. And now I'm a web developer, woohoo! Not so much. It's this security mindset. They're not actually following this shift. So gallery of fail. So this I pulled this off I travel a lot. This is at a major, and I give this presentation a lot, and I keep updating this screenshot because it still exists. So this is at a very famous hotel chain. The name begins with an H, and their daughter apparently likes amateur videography. I don't know, she looks like a raccoon with that night vision stuff. It's not my bag. But you basically go in and buy internet access, right? Well, they went ahead and had I want to pay $9.95 for some internet access, and literally through the URL, it bounced me through a system and said, and price equals 99. So the next time through, client-side pricing. Basically, the website itself said, how much money would you like to pay for internet today? So the next night, I went ahead and I set up in this proxy. This is actually our product. So I sent a breakpoint, and I said, look, when you're going to send them this thing that says I'm going to pay $9.95, set a breakpoint so I can modify this request before it goes to the server. And I set it to 1 cent. And then I let it go through. And then I went down and I asked for my hotel bill. And sure enough, first day, $9.95 for internet. Next day, 1 cent for internet. So of course, the final night, I went ahead and